approve drugs too quickly, also worried about what he might do with medical devices.
We have talked about that on the takeaway, the sort of approval of drugs, particularly opioids, that seem to be moving through the system quite quickly. And Gottlieb does have a mixed record when it comes to that. Gottlieb also has a record of dealing with the e-cigarette and vaping industry. How did he approach vaping, particularly when it comes to underage people?
When Dr. Gottlieb first got to the FDA, after a few months, he announced a landmark tobacco control plan that had two prongs. He said he was going to reduce the level of nicotine in regular cigarettes and render them non-addictive, and then to help people who were already smokers and were addicted to cigarettes, he was going to give e-cigarette companies more time to comply with new regulations. So when he did that in July 2017, the public health community was very angry because the public health community warned that by allowing e-cigarettes to stay on the market for so long, for 5 more years, kids would get addicted, and that's what happened. And Dr. Gottlieb has acknowledged it and then had to try to backtrack and crack down on the industry.
Gottlieb was also sort of behind this idea to get rid of menthol in cigarettes, and that was something that was considered quite controversial given the racial dynamics of who smokes menthol cigarettes in the United States, mainly people of color, particularly African American communities. So whatever happened there? Can you remind us about that story?
Sure. Dr. Gottlieb has a proposal to get menthol out of cigarettes. Most public health advocates, including people who are in the, African American health community, have long believed that the tobacco industry has used menthol to hook black people. And menthol is something that is thought to increase the possibility of addiction. Now, the way I look at it, it's not that the FDA is trying to target the smokers. The FDA is trying to prevent more young people from getting hooked on menthol cigarettes because menthol cigarettes are so addictive.
Sheila Kaplan is a public health reporter at the New York Times Washington Bureau. Sheila, thanks so much.
Thank you, Tanzina.
The Takeaway is supported by Noom, offering a personalized weight loss program that uses psychology and small goals to change habits with the goal of losing weight and keeping it off for good. Learn more at Noom, Noom.com.
And LegalZoom. This March, LegalZoom is recognizing entrepreneurs during Small Business Month by offering services to help meet legal needs. More information is available at LegalZoom.com/takeaway.
This is WHYY, the forecast for today. Partly sunny skies, highs only reaching the mid-30s. Few clouds about tonight, very cold, lows dipping to the low 20s. Tomorrow we could see some light snow, maybe some rain later in the day. Temperature topping out near 40 for Friday. Saturday, more seasonable, bit of sun with temperatures reaching the upper 40s. Then Sunday, milder yet, rain in the morning, high near 60. Right now in Philadelphia, we've got mostly cloudy skies and 33 degrees.
This is The Takeaway with Tanzina Vega.
It's been almost 4 days since tornadoes devastated Lee County, Alabama, leaving 23 people dead. Search and rescue operations are still underway.
Things were just totally destroyed.
Michael Freeman is an environmental health and safety specialist with Auburn University in Alabama, and he's been aiding those impacted by the storm.
Brick homes, mobile homes, it didn't matter. They were totally taken down to the foundation. Of course, the mobile homes were twisted and thrown around. It's like many explosions went off throughout the community, and it's very significant. And it'll have a lasting impact, unfortunately, to this area.
Freeman expects the recovery will be far worse for poorer residents, who he says often have the hardest time accessing aid and insurance to rebuild. and some of the area's poorest residents were hit the hardest by Sunday's tornado.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of mobile homes in that area. A lot of people live out there because it's more affordable, or it is the best way for them to have a roof over their head, and they are quite susceptible to weather-related events.
We have the latest from the area with Pat Duggins. He's the news director for Alabama Public Radio.
The people that we spoke to initially, well, one met the tornado with almost bemusement. That's because their house wasn't destroyed. And another was in a state of complete disorientation because their house largely was. It's a matter of simply going through the process of finding out if your possessions are still there. Is there anything left? Then you have to deal with the relief agencies because you've got, the Red Cross and Samaritan's Purse coming in. They're going to be doing with, the basic, meat and potato sort of survival issues. And then come the bureaucrats. You're going to have the insurance adjusters, the Small Business Administration. FEMA is going to show up. If people need temporary housing, that takes time to move that in. So it's a long, slow process. It usually follows a pattern. And it's when you start, working with the insurance adjusters, particularly in low-income communities, that's when the disparities can start popping up. And then the realities of, can I rebuild? Will it be as good as it was before? That's when that starts to sink in.
You spoke to some residents on the ground. One was Peggy Hutchinson. Give us a sense of what her experience was like.
Well, this is my umpteenth tornado, and kind of like if you want to really get a feel for what happened, the pictures of the damage, those kind of satisfy a morbid curiosity. But I mean, to me, it's the emotional reaction that really kind of sort of like sets the stage and makes each natural disaster an individual event. So the first thing that I did when I got there, I went straight to the Red Cross shelter, and Peggy had just been brought in by her grandson, and she was in a state of disorientation. I mean, she wanted to talk, she was able to talk, but the toll of the storm, which literally was on top of her house, was very easy to hear.
Yeah, I'm shaking up, my nerves still up, but God got it the power. Ain't nothing we can do about it but pray and be grateful and move forward. This is a sad day.
And the way it sounded to her, the way it smelled to her, all of those memories were just very, very vivid. And again, sort of follow that same pattern that you get with people who've just gone through a tornado.
Oh boy, he was wind was so high, and he was like a little roaring hood in them trees, popping like, pop, 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 it popping like firecrackers. And that wind was so strong, you heard a little roar. Shoot, I said, that was it.
And then there were the smells. I mean, the smell of pine and freshly turned earth, because you've got like a storm that's a half-mile wide, 170 miles long, that moved about a 70-mile track, rather, that just, tore up everything in its path. And just, when you walk outside, depending on where you are, everything's gone.
Pat, one of the things that struck me as I was watching the coverage of this unfold during the week was, I'm sure these were well-meaning reports about how people can avoid tornadoes in the future, including going to a shelter or going to their basement or actually purchasing a shelter. Now, what I'm confused by is if you don't have that, if you live in a mobile home, if you can't afford a shelter, what else do you do? Are you finding that a lot of folks are having trouble just making ends meet?
Well, without making any disparagements, those are probably reporters. This is not their first tornado. There was like 8 to 10 minutes for people of warning for the people living in Beauregard, and there are community shelters. If you can't afford one, if you don't have a basement, which is not uncommon in Alabama, you can go to a shelter. But if you only have like 10 minutes and you have a whole bunch of family members to get together, that may not have been enough time to escape, assuming that you heard the sirens, decided to heed the warnings, and then go to where you needed to go. So it's kind of easy to say, but tough to do.
So Tuscaloosa, Alabama, there was a devastating tornado in 2011. Can you give us a sense of what the long-term impact is of these types of natural disasters on rural communities? That's sort of what we're talking about now, especially low income. Does the recovery take longer, Pat?
Well, okay, there's a number of different ways to look at it. The mental health issues usually start creeping up around like 5 years after the storm. That was the case in Tuscaloosa. Reality hits you like, oh my gosh, my house is gone. Oh my gosh, the restaurant that I used to go to isn't there anymore. So you have that to deal with. Then you've got the economic problems, and both of those can be looked at macro and micro. Micro is whether or not your house got blown up, okay? Macro is whether or not are the area's major employers still there? Do you have jobs to go back to? Because at some point these people need income. Now, for Lee County, the big employers obviously would be, state and local government. Those jobs are still there. Auburn University, that's still there. But right in the middle of Beauregard, you've got these little bitty, drib and drab manufacturing jobs. It's still being established as to whether or not they're there. And the state of Alabama is already sending out notes to the press saying, hey, listen, unemployment benefits are going to be available in the area. So it's entirely possible that some jobs were lost. So in addition to losing your property, possibly losing family members, people may be on the unemployment line.
Pat, let's talk a little bit also about the FEMA response and insurance responses. I've never been through something like this, but I couldn't imagine the first thing to do. Is it clear for people on the ground where they need to go to start getting this type of assistance, where they need to go to? Is there any help for them to sort of weed through the paperwork that is going to come with something like this?
Well, I can talk from a personal aspect, because my wife and I had moved into our new house in Tuscaloosa 1 week before the Tuscaloosa tornado hit in 2011. So we kind of dealt with that ourselves. It's just a matter of just like going to a certain spot, standing in a certain line, filling out certain forms. I mean, we were well insured. We were displaced. Our house was rendered unlivable for about 7 months. So we just moved back into an apartment and just waited for the construction to get done. In lower income areas, particularly following the tornado outbreak in 2011, I kept hearing anecdotal reports from friends who lived in the Alberta City area, which is just east of Tuscaloosa. That's a predominantly African American, lower income. Don't want to draw any generalizations, but it just is. And some of them were just having horrible wrestling matches with their insurance companies, simply trying to get their houses rebuilt. And it was a slow process, and from their perspective, a pretty daunting one.
I've been speaking with Pat Duggins, news director for Alabama Public Radio, about recovery efforts following the devastating tornado that hit Lee County, Alabama, Sunday afternoon. Pat, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tensi.
The Takeaway is supported by Noom, offering a personalized weight loss program that uses psychology and small goals to change habits, with the goal of losing weight and keeping it off for good. Learn more at Noom, Noom.com.
At 12:48, this is WHYY. Keep it here for Here and Now at 1. The surge of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border is reportedly pushing border agents to the breaking point. Jeremy Hobson will have more on this. Also, the cannabis industry in Colorado says it desperately needs fresh investor capital. And Robin Young will speak with Democratic presidential candidate Kirsten Gillibrand. Stay close. Here and Now begins again at 1 on WHYY.
The University of Pennsylvania supports WHYY. Are you drinking more than you want to? UPenn is conducting a research study of a medication that may help people reduce or stop their drinking. To participate, you must be 18 to 70 and want to reduce or stop your drinking. The study provides a medical evaluation, blood tests, counseling, and monitoring of your drinking. Details at 215-746-1987.
This is The Takeaway with Tanzina Vega.
In the world of Latin American cinema, Chilean director Sebastián Lelio has been making waves since his 2005 debut, La Sagrada Familia. His 2017 film, A Fantastic Woman, won the Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film. But recently, Lelio has been venturing outside of Chile. His second English language film, Gloria Bell, opens in theaters this Friday. It's a middle-aged romance starring Julianne Moore and John Turturro.
Some days I'm happy. Some days I'm not.
Like everyone.
Like everyone.
Viewers familiar with Lelio's earlier films might be getting a sense of déjà vu. That's because the new movie is a remake of his 2013 Spanish-language film, Gloria. But Lelio told me that doesn't mean it's the same.
This is like a cover of a melody played with a different rock band.
I sat down with the director to learn more about what led him to revisit Gloria and to get his take on representation both in front of and behind the camera.
The game of the film is to intensely observe Gloria, the main character, from every possible angle, going through the entire emotional spectrum, and she's always framed. She's in every scene, she's in every image. So when you change the actress / woman that is interpreting Gloria, then even if the story doesn't change in its mechanisms, the soul of the film is modified, because now you're observing a new human being interpreting that woman.